So, welcome to the highly anticipated code section. And I know that we all have highly anticipated what? To write code. It'd be like, can we just move over to the editor, right? And I perfectly understand. But now, thank God, finally, we are now in the code section. And we're going to write a lot of codes. And like, we're going to play around and see how every single component of this application will come into place. That was like a whole lot of introduction, man. But like, yeah, that's what we're gonna do in this video. So we'll be writing, we'll be going through the code together. And remember, as I promised, I do not have anything prepped. And if you can look at my screen, it's like a blank code text editor, right? So nothing. So why? So the reason to that is because we're going to be writing it together, and we're going to see the process, the thought process. We're going to think and build logic together and see how every single component of this application connects together and come up with something reasonable at the end of the application. So enough of that, let's dive straight to business. So now let's move over to our code. So what do we want to do here? So I was thinking of a title to give to this vid section. So how about we call it like a rough work, right? So this is where I will be explaining every single logic that we'll be implementing in the main application. Yeah, we'll be writing code, definitely. And everything we'll be doing in the main application you'll be seeing in here. But I just kind of need you to understand what we are about to do. So like when I told you that you cannot load a Python object into a dictionary, into a file storage, or even a dictionary into a file storage that you're going to have to convert it to string, we'll be demonstrating all of it right now. Even the UUID model, the dictionary, the manipulating of dictionary, the reloading and the serializing and the serializing of JSON, all of them will be doing over here. So why did I come up with this pattern? So the reason is that after we understand how the main application is going to work by modeling it over here, when we go over to the main application, we will not be wasting much of our time over there because we've now understand every single thing that we'll be doing in the main application. So when I do something like call a dictionary and manipulate the dictionary and maybe call or instantiate an object dynamically using a dictionary, so I'm like, what the hell is it doing? You will be seeing every single thing in here. Is it clear? Thank you so much. So now let's move over to our editor and write code. So I was thinking about let's model a person class and work with a person class and see how to load a person class to a file storage and also the serialize and serialize. So let's begin. So now let's write class of person. So let's do what? Let's call the init __ init method. Then in this init method, we want to pass 3 arguments or 3 parameters. So we want to pass the name, the age, and the gender. So we do self.name is equal to name. Don't worry, still instantiate it, and we do self.age is equal to age, and we do self.gender is equal to gender. And we come over here and we do name, age, gender, right? Perfect, fine and good. So what can we do? We could basically come over here and do what? And instantiate our class. Exactly, perfect. So that's what we want to do, right? So we could just say instantiate our class. So we just come over here and we do what? Let's just say person1 is equal to what? And we do person. Let's pass the parameters obviously, and we do cs3. Let's say 40, and let's say male, of course. And we'll come over here and we do print person1. So if we run our code right now, what do we expect to see? Are we going to see CS340 male? Obviously not. We're going to see what? We're going to see the object representation of this. So like we're going to see the memory address of this object in our terminal. So if we come over here and we do Python 3 main.py. So yes, we see what the address of this of this class, right? So now if we want to get the name, we just basically have to do dot name to get the name. So you see S3. But this is kind of like a very big work. Why? So imagine we have like thousands of classes. So we have to basically be doing person1.name to get the name, person1.age to get the age, and person1.gender to get the gender. It makes no sense, right? So Python has our interest at heart, and that's why Python introduced an underscore str method, which is also called what? Which is also called a magic method or a dunder method, right? So we could just introduce it and we do str, and inside of here it returns. So it does not print. So you can't print something in the str, you have to return it definitely, because when you return, it's going to be instantiated with this person, and whenever you print this, it just basically automatically calls every single code over here. So you have to return. And I forgot to mention, this is called type annotation. So this none basically means that this init method is not returning anything. So if you can see over here, we're not returning anything. Then this means that this underscore str is going to return an str type of data, which is a string data, right? So we could do return, and we'll have to construct the string definitely. So we have to do self, we have to pass the self.name, and we'll have to do self.age, and we'll have to do self.gender. Makes sense, right? So let's just kind of format it a little bit, and we'll have to pass over here and do age, over here and do gender. So for print now, we are going to see what? We're going to see this object or this class represented in this format. So what's happening is that whenever we call the person one behind the scene, it's going to definitely call this magic method. That's why it's called magic, because it's happening behind the scenes for you. So it's like magical, or it's like a mystery, right? So now if we print our code again, I will do Python 3 main.py. So now we get name is CS3, age is 40, and gender is male. So we're no longer getting the address of what? Of this class. Blah! One step or mission accomplished. A milestone. We'll just hit a milestone right now, because we're now seeing our object represented in this format instead of what? Instead of in the objects in the address format, right? And it makes a lot of sense. So now, what is the next step? So the next step is that this str now, we want to what? We want to improve our step, because we want to save this into a database. So if we want to save this into a database, what can we do? So let's call a method, or let's write a method named what? Named save. So this save is going to take one parameter, and we're going to save the object into what? Into a file storage. And if you remember, I told you that this self keyword is very, very crucial. And why is it very, very crucial? Or it's like what we'll be working with in this project. And let me show you something. If I come over this save and I do print and I do ID of self, and I come over here and say print ID of person one. So I'm printing the ID of self and I'm printing the ID of person one. So let me just come over here and call the save method. So I have to do person one.save. So if I go over to my terminal and run, so can you see the both have same addresses? So 744, 74481, 8175. So they have both addresses. So that means this self over here is also equal to this person one object or instance over here, right? So that in mind, that means if we should persist or if we should write this self into the database, which is our file storage, that means we are basically writing this CS340 and mail or this person one to our database, obviously, right? Because they have both memory address. So that's why I'm telling you that we will most likely be working with this self keyword. So bear that in mind. So for that reason, this save is used to save our data into our database. So what can we do? We could basically do bits. So this is just called a context manager, right? So we don't have to open and close. Python will do it for us behind the scene. I love Python. It just do everything behind the scene for us. They don't want us to suffer. So with open and have to pass what? The name of the file that we want to save our data into. So the name of the file is file.json. And what method or what operation are we doing? We are doing what we are writing, obviously, to our database, and we do as file, right? Then we'll come over here and we do file dot write. And what are we writing? We want to write this self into the database, and we do self. And obviously we are calling it over here, right? So we expect that if we run our code, we should write this object into the database and have an entry of this user into our database. Makes sense, right? So yes, let's try it out and see what will be the output of this code. And let's clear our terminal and run again. And it says what? Write argument must be str, not person. And that's what I told you. You cannot write a Python object into our dictionary, into our file storage. You can't write a Python dictionary or a Python object into what? A file storage. The write method in Python only does what? Only writes a data type of what? Of str. So if you want to achieve that, what can we do? We could basically come over here and convert this from self or from objects to a string. And now this should work. So if we go over here and do Python, so now it's worked, right? So it has written this data into our database. So this address is coming over here. So let's just take off this ID, and now we have to go to our file storage. So I have to open it, and this is our file storage. And this is what? This is our file storage. And now we have an entry. So now we have name, CS3, age is 40, gender is male. Come on, we have an entry of this particular user inside of our database. And we could, create more users. And we could come over here and do what? And just change this to person 2, and change this to person 2, and change this to person 2, and just say big boy is our name, and say 45 because we have the big boy, and say male, right? So we have to write to the database again. But now we don't have to make use of write, because write will what? Overwrite the data inside of our file storage already. I don't want to do that. So what can we do? We could say W plus, right? Which means, sorry, we have to do A. Yeah, that's A. So append. So just append and don't overwrite, right? So we come over here and run our code again. Yes, we have 2 entries over here, big boy and CS3. And we'll come over here. We should have an entry of what? Of name. So we have gender, male, and another name. So you know what we can do? Let's just come inside of this write and also do file dot write. Let's just write an empty. So this should be file. So let's just write a new line so we could see our data formatted well. So what we could do, let's just delete the file storage and run our code again. And now, okay, so back. So can you see now we have name is CS3, gender male, and name is big boy, age is 40. So this is progress. We now have what? We now have an entry. We have double entry of what? Of users inside of our database. Clap for yourself. Job well done. We have double entry. So we have first person and second person. So we're kind of progressing, right? Makes a lot of sense. But now we have a problem. And I know you was anticipating for that. We have a problem. And what is the problem? So now let's say, for instance, the first person says, okay, I want to update my name. How can you tell that this CS3 is the name of the user? Or that age is this, or gender is this? You can't, because this is just like a literal string. And aside from that, strings are immutable, right? Strings are immutable. So for that reason, we cannot change anything in this database. Once they are created, we can't change them, right? So that way, you know that a user can no longer update any value in the database, right? So what can we do? We can now say, okay, let's be smart enough. Instead of writing object into the database, how about we write a dictionary? Is it making sense? And we can say what? You know what? Let's not write this over here. Let's write what? A dictionary. So what we can do is we just have to do So what can we do? We could just do with open file storage, and instead of this, we could just take this out, and we can now say what? We can now say instead of writing a file, instead of writing a string or an object, let's write a dictionary. So before we can write a dictionary, we have to convert this object into a dictionary. And Python makes it very, very easy for us. So we could just basically say self dot underscore underscore dict. It just gets the dictionary representation of this self. So let's just save it to what? To a variable called to dict. So what can we now do? We can now say file dot write, right? And now we cannot write a dictionary also. We have to write string, you remember, right? So we could just pass this over here and say str and say to JSON. Makes sense, right? Say to JSON. So what we can do now is let's just put this to write over here first of all so that it can overwrite the database so that it just takes off this entry with a new entry, right? That's why we change it to write. So now let's run our code again. And yes, code successful. And we can now go back to our file.json. Now we have a dictionary representation. Can you see that we are progressing? We are now what? We are converting our data from object to str, from str to dictionary, from dictionary. But this is kind of a strange dictionary because the type is not a dictionary. It's a type of str in Python. But come on, first of all, we now have a value something over here. So we can now say that, okay, this is the name, this is the age, and this is the gender, right? But we still have a problem. Same problem as we faced earlier, because we cannot update any value over here. But first of all, clap for yourself because we've made a progress. We now have it represented in the dictionary, which is the first step of serialization. So this is what kind of the first step of serialization, and we get to see that in action. So what can we do now in order to what? In order to get this data in a very good format that we can work with? Do you know? Or should I help you? We have to do what? We have to introduce JSON. Yes, that's what we made mention in the whiteboard. We have to introduce what? JSON. So instead of writing an ordinary Python dictionary, why am I calling it ordinary? I'm now downplaying dictionaries in Python. My fault because of JSON. Yeah, forgive me. But instead of writing a Python dictionary, we can now write what? We can now write a JavaScript object. So we have to convert from Python dictionary to JavaScript object and now persist in our data. And you see that it will make sense. So let's do that. So we'll come over here. So instead of now writing this Python dictionary, we'll have to do what? We'll have to import a module called what? JSON. So are you following? So I need you to understand the whole steps that what we'll be doing in order to get a full application. So this is like the planning phase. It's not like everything was like magic or rocket science. These were the steps that we went through in order to get that full application. So I need you to really, really understand it. So you see the way we are what? We are migrating our data from str to dictionary to JSON. Is it making sense? So let's do what? Let's go over to our save method and let's just take this off. Utilize a Python dictionary to a JSON object. We're going to utilize the dump method of the JSON module. And the dump method of the JSON module takes into argument and an additional argument or parameter. So now we're going to say what? We're going to say JSON.dump. So this is not what we're going to do. What? We're going to take the self object, which is a self. But now we have to convert the self to a dictionary, right? So we could just do self.dict. And it's going to also take what? It's going to also take a parameter, which is what? Where we want to persist it. And it's inside of what? The file. Remember, we have this file over here, right? And that's it. So we have called the self method. And if we run our code, we should see an entry in the file storage. And now let's run our code. And now it's code successful. And if we go over here, can you see? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? We now have a JSON data in our database. And this looks very appealing to the eye. Look at how neat it is. Well, that's one of the characteristics of JSON. It's what? It's easy to read and understand. Look at the name, big boy, the age, 45, the gender, male. But if you noticed, it wrote what? It wrote the last what? It wrote the last object. It wrote the last object. So that's because we are using write. And this write overwrites the first one, gets called, and it overwrites the second one, overwrites the first one. So it just has the second object. So you know what? Let's just take this off and just work with one object for now. And yes, we come over here, we now have one object. Perfect. Perfect. Another milestone achieved. Clap for yourself. But I was thinking that, so since we're working a lot with this dictionary, how about we make this dictionary a separate, or this returning of a dictionary from our object a separate method on its own. What do you think about it? So, yeah, let's do it. Instead of doing it manually here, because we'll be working with it a lot. So let's just call another method and say def to dict. And we'll have to pass the self. And what we could do here is we could just say to JSON, and we say self dot dict, and we could just should we return? No, let's not return. Let's just come over here and just call to dict for now. So if we run this code, it should also work. So we have to call it because it's a method, so we have to call it. So if we run this, it should also still work. And if we come over here, oh, okay, yeah, sorry, we have to return. Yeah, we'll have to return the JSON. So that's, I told you we'll be working together. I'll have to return the JSON. So if we come over here, run our code again and go over here, we should have an entry. Now, we see that when we didn't return, we got a null, right? So we have to basically return, so we could call it over here and populate our database. And we'll be seeing why we have it as a separate method, because we'll have to get to start working with it as time goes on. So now the problem is that whenever we do what, we do a new, we run our code, it just overwrites the database. So if we uncomment this boy over here, and we run our code, definitely, you know, it's going to overwrite the first one. So what we can do is we can just do what? We can just use append, right? So if we use append, we expect to see another entry, right? So if we do run our code again, so we have double code and come over here. We now have double entry. So let's just take the first one off. So now we now have what? Double entry. But there is a problem. And what is the problem? What is the problem? See the problem now. So the problem is why this is visually appealing to the eye of the user or the programmer, because yeah, we can literally see it, but it's not appealing to the eye of our computer. I'm sorry to say that. Why? Because the computer cannot literally understand what is happening over here. So let's say now I tell the computer, okay, CS3 wants to update his or her name. How can the computer get to know the entry for CS3 or the entry for big boy? Why? Because there is no way we can determine. It's just littered over here, like a chunk of what? Of data. So we need a way to organize these data in some sort of format, so that when we can get something like an ID and we'll place it to a particular user. So we know that whenever we want to talk about this user, we just get the ID of that user. So that's why it's a JavaScript object. We could get an ID and assign a dictionary of a user to that word, to that ID. So when we need an ID or CS3, if we access it, we can now use from that ID and do what? And access every single attribute of that user, CS3. You know what? Before I even show you what I'm talking about, let's take off this second, what's it called? Second entry, and just come over here and get this to be right. And you know, just comment this out and run our code again. So it just gives us like one entry into the database, because that you saw earlier is not a proper JSON format, right? So let's just work with one entry. So remember I told you that this dump also takes one more additional parameter, and this parameter is called indent, and we have to just pass like any level of indentation that we want. So let me just give you like 2. Remember this was like this format. If I run my code again, watch how it will be represented. So I think that this is now much appealing to the eye. Makes sense, right? So I was saying that instead of having that data littered in our database, because that's still not even a JSON format representation of a data, right? So how about we have something like another big dictionary outside of this, and we'll have an ID of maybe 1. We have an ID like this, ID, and we'll have this. So how about we have a dictionary like this? So let's indent this properly. And yes, how about we have it? So over here in this ID can be, so we can now have another entry like this. So we could paste something like this over here, and this should be ID2. Makes sense, right? So can you see now? So now, let's just call this ID1. So now, if the first user wants to access his or her account, we could just basically tell the first user, you know what, get me your ID. And he says, my ID is what? ID1. And using the ID1, you can do what? You can query this or her database. So you can just grab the ID1 and get the values and the key and values of ID1. And you can now give the person a space to what? To update his or her data in your database. Can you see how we are what? Progressing. We are what? We are trying to shape our database in a way that we can understand, or in a way that we can what? Perform operations in it. So there is no specific way. So we are the one creating logic on how to do what? On how to go about this our database. So I think this is much more easy to what? To query. So we have an ID bearing the data, right? So let me just indent this properly, and this boy should come over here. So we have an ID bearing and another dictionary of a particular user. So this is a dictionary of a particular user. So every user has a separate dictionary, so what we can work with. But now, how can we get this ID? So what are we going to do? We are going to make use of the what? The class name of the class name of the class, and what? And a UUID model to what? To get the ID that we are going to place inside of there. Why are we using the UUID model? So we are using the UUID model because it's a model that does what? That dynamically or randomly generates a unique identifier every single time we run our application. So I don't know how possible it can be for you to give different ID to a lot of models, because we're having a lot of models. You see, we're having user model, we're having amenities, we're having a lot of models, right? So why we use UUID is because it's going to randomly generate the identifier for us or for our models uniquely to every of them. So it's most likely never possible to have the same ID generated from a UUID model, right? So we're going to import the UUID model. And if we import the UUID model, we're going to come over here. Let's just take this little boy and take this out and just call a self.id is equal to, so let's just do from UUID import UUID4, because we make use of 4 right now, and we just do UUID4. And we'll have to just take this off and come over here and do ID is what? ID is self.id, right? And we'll also have to take this little boy out of our way. And I think we're good for the most time. So I have to just run our code and Python 3. So it says what? Object of type UUID is not just serializable, which I intentionally wanted to show you so you understand the things that we are doing. So if you notice, I passed str over here, which doesn't even make any sense, because by default, all these will be returned as str. Python variable is str by default. So me passing this str over here makes no sense, but I just passed it so that I can tell you that JSON understands some certain types of data type from every single programming language that you're working with, right? So JSON does not understand a data type of UUID, right? So that means over here, and I do print type to get the type of the type of the UUID model, and I come over here and I do print type self dot name. So I just have to comment this out so it doesn't get out our way, and I just do Python 3 main.py. So it says class of UUID.UUID. So that means that this UUID model is a class of what? UUID. And now remember that I told you that JSON understands some certain type of data type in some certain ways, right? So I have a little article over here which just says from the JSON documentation. And it says that what JSON converts Python dictionary to object, list to arrays, str to string, int to JSON number. So can you see there is nothing like class of UUID over here? So how can we solve that problem that we saw initially? So we could just basically take this off and uncomment this save again and try to run our code again. And it says object of type UUID is not JSON serializable. That means that JSON does not have a way of converting a Python UUID to JSON representation, and over here you cannot see it, right? So that is why we get this error. And anytime you are working with from converting from any object or any type of object you are working with to JSON representation, you're almost likely going to see what? Encoding error. So that's encoder. And if you are reconstructing back from JSON, you're most likely going to see what? Decoding error. Makes sense, right? So what can we do to solve that problem? We could basically do what? Pass str over here. So now JSON is going to convert this str into what? String, JSON string. Makes sense, right? And if that's true, come over here and run our code again. And works now perfectly. So if we go over here, we get this in our database. So you see we now have an ID of UUID in our database. And remember that we was trying to do what we are heading to somewhere, which is what? Constructing a key. And it's going to have something like our object as a value. Our dream database is going to look something like this when we are done what? Constructing. Now we are taking it step by step. Right? So appreciate the little moments. Remember when we started from string, we migrated to dictionary, from dictionary, we migrated to JSON, from JSON, we migrated to having an ID. And now we are trying to do what? We're trying to construct a perfect something. So this is what our dream database or JSON representation. So now a second person might have an entry like this, so we just have something like this. Is it making sense? Is it making sense? So this is what our dream database. So we are still at the early stage, but when we're done, we're going to see how we came about something like this. So we'll be constructing it ourselves bit by bit. So let's take it off, and maybe just like copy it and just keep it over here so we can see what we are working with, right? So this is what we are looking up to, man. We just want to have something like this. So let's try and see how far we can go. So first of all, if you look at this, you can notice that we have what? We have a key. And that key consists of the class name and an ID. Obviously, we've gotten an ID, right? So we need a way to construct this key and append it into a dictionary. So if you look at this is what? Another dictionary, which is this little boy over here, this dictionary. And it's harboring, or it's inside of a bigger dictionary, right? Is it making sense? So if we want to construct this key, first off, how can we construct this key? So let's say we have another class. So let's call that class a class of new. So let's say the class of new will have a key. So we just say self, it's responsible for constructing a key. And we come over here and we just do key is equal to, so for us to construct this key, let's get our key. For us to construct this key, let's paste it over here so we can be looking at it. For us to construct this key, can you think of how to construct a key like this? Think, pause this video and think before we go over it. So pause the video and think about constructing this key. So constructing this key is very, very simple. So what we can do is pass an F string and do what? So if you look at this person is the class name. So for us to get a class name, we could just do something like this and do self dot underscore underscore class underscore underscore dot underscore underscore name for us to get the name of the class. And we pass a dot over here and say what? The dot, look at the dot and say what? And say self dot UUI. No, sorry, we call it ID, which is the ID coming over here. And we are done. So we could just basically return this key. And that's it. We now have what? We now have a key. Right? Is it making sense? We've not constructed a key using what? Using the class name and the ID. And if we want to verify this, our key, we could just come over here and do pressing key is equal to pressing one dot, we call it new, right? And we just print pressing key. We just print pressing key. And if we print our code, and yes, look at it, we now have a key of pressing dot the ID. And look, whenever I run this, it gives me a different UUID, which is what I told you. Whenever we run, we get a different UUID. Is it making sense? So that is how we can do what we can construct a key. So now that we've constructed a key, we've made progress. Yeah, congratulations. We've actually gotten a key. But now the problem is that we need to get a bigger dictionary and do what? And assign the key as the key of the dictionary and the whole object as what? As the value of the dictionary. This is where the problem lies. Because now you have to think very, very smart. And can I beg you for a favor? Can you pause this video right now and think of how to create something like this? So now is the problem, because we have to devise a means for us to assign the whole object as a value to the key of a bigger dictionary. So I can give you a hint. Get another dictionary, assign the key assign the key obviously as a key, and the whole self converted to a dictionary as a value. Luckily for us, we have a method to convert to a dictionary. Is it making sense? So hopefully you do that. So let's try to have or to achieve something like that. And for that reason, we have to do this when we want to save or persist into the file storage. So we can now come over here in the file storage and we could create a variable called serialized obj is equal to what? Is equal to a bigger dictionary, which is this dictionary that we'll have over here. So if it's a bigger dictionary, what then do we want to do? We want to create a way or want to devise a way that we could get this ID as a key to that dictionary. So what can we do? We could say we could use a for loop, or it's a for loop. Okay. So let's think about this together. So we could just say, serialize obj at index. So we need to call the self dot new, which returns a key to us. I will pass it over here. So this is a key. We're actually getting a key. If we do this, we'll get a key, right? And we want to assign what? We want to assign the value that we get from this to dict inside of it, right? So that value is absolutely another dictionary. So we could just do self dot to dict. Is this making sense? So now we are getting the bigger dictionary and we are assigning a key, which is the key that this new method is going to return. So doing this self.new is going to return a key. And we are saying take all the whole dictionary that will be returned from this to dict. I'm pointing as if you can actually see me pointing on the screen. So take the whole dictionary that will be returned from this to dict and assign it as a value to this big dictionary. Is it making sense? So now we've successfully done that. So what can we now do? We can now basically take this off and just do what? And just persist the bigger dictionary and see what we achieved. So this is now the file and the indent. So now if we run our code and let's see what will happen. Okay, perfect. No errors, and let's check our file storage, the moment of truth. Let's see. And yeah, makes sense, man. Can you see now? We now have a bigger dictionary harboring a little boy dictionary over here as a child. Isn't that something you should be happy about? Because remember, we had something very small and we started from string. We started from the ground, man. And look at where we are. God did, brother. Like, remember when we were still dealing with strings, dictionary, just seeing object, and now we have a very fine and appealing data in our database. Come on, this is like a very big milestone we just achieved. Look at it. We have a person dot the ID, and we have ID and these and these and these. So this is God did, honestly. So can you see we've made a very big progress? Clap for yourself one more time. So this is how we derive in getting a dictionary representation or representing our objects in this format. Can you see? And now we can now start doing what? We can now start changing these our boys one after the other. So what can we do? We could now say, instead of having the name, let's have what? Let's have self dot so this is created at is equal to, so for that we need a datetime object model, definitely. So we do from date time import datetime, right? So we could just basically come over here and do datetime dot now. And why do we need this datetime? So we need it so that we can actually know the actual time that an object was created. So whenever you register on what's it called, on an application, they keep track of when that particular user registered. So that's why maybe in Twitter, if you change your name, I think it's not Twitter, I think maybe Facebook. I've forgotten. I don't do Facebook, but I know that then there was a time, like, if you change your username and within a certain range of time, you can't change it unless it's like 80 days or 30 days, something like that. So that's why you need like to get a time every single operation was being executed on that particular user's object, which is that user's what's it called, account, right? So that's why we have like self.created at. So we can now have another one that is like self.updated at is equal to date time. So updated at is not basically when a change occurred in your account. So we could just say self.created at. So let's just keep it at created at. It's same thing. So date time dot now, at that particular time, the change happened. It's current time, so that's the time it happened. So we're just assigning the value of the time dot now inside of there. Makes sense. Absolutely. So we could just come over here, leave our ID same, change our name to created at, and change the age to updated at, right? So let's change this to created at and change this age to updated at. Whew, I think we're making a progress. So we could just take off this little boy and come over here and also take them out. Not for, but we don't need you no more. So that's it. And right now, moment of truth, let's try to run our application and we'll have a problem. What is the problem? It's saying object of type datetime is not just serializable. And I guess by now you know the fix. You know the fix, right? So datetime is not serializable. So what can we do? We could just basically say str, and I think we should be good by now. So run our code again. And yeah, we good. So we get the ID, the created at, and the updated at. And if we come over here, just see. And yes, we have what? We have our dream data representation. But hold on, it's not done yet. Don't rejoice. rejoice a little bit more. We still have one more solution to apply on this data, or one more feature to add. And what is the feature? We have to add what? We have to add the class name of that object so that we can actually know a particular class in our database or a particular model, because we're having lots of models. I showed you during the intro to the video. We had user, we have amenity, we have place, we have a lot of models. So we need to also add the class over here, so that when we are deserializing, we can actually use that class name to deserialize back to our Python object and reconstruct and start working with Python object instead of our application. So how can we now add that little boy over here? So for us to have underscore class is equal to person. Can you tell me how we can do that? Can you tell me how we can do it? So how we can basically do it is very, very simple. So what we can do is we could just come over here, because remember we are persisting this dictionary. So this dictionary is what we are converting to what? Is what we are assigning into our big what's it called? Big dictionary, right? So what we can basically do, we can just basically come over here and do to JSON, and we say underscore class is equal to what? Is equal to, remember, self dot underscore class dot underscore name, right? Underscore, and that's it. Fine and good. So now when this dictionary comes over here, it just takes this and appends inside of the dictionary and returns it to the save method, and the save method just calls it and assign it into the big object. And if we run our code again, and it says what? Keys must be str, int, float, bool, or none. Keys must be str. So that's coming from let's get 44 in save in chunk, and also 54. So where is the problem coming from? So you said the problem is coming from over here. So that should not come from this boy, I don't think, but I mean, let's see. So it should not, because that's basically an str. Okay, I know it will not be coming from there. Type error. So this is a serialized file. So what could be the problem? So I'm coming. So let me check. Okay, working. So that means the problem is definitely coming from here. Okay, yeah. So we forgot to put this over here. So for crying out loud, I know you must have seen the error, and we saw the error. So we are trying to assign a value, a key and a value. So this is like the key. So for us to access a key in dictionary, we have to put the parenthesis, right? So that's why it's echoing that problem or that error. And as we fixed it right now, so if we run our code again, yeah, we're good. And if we come over here and check our code, we now have the underscore class pressing inside of our database. Come on. We've done so much. Man, I feel so proud of myself right now. And you should feel same also. Take a deep breath, because it was like a long run for us to understand what was actually happening in this database, right? But now, the last but not the least, we're not done yet. Because why? Because we also need to add a new entry like this. Yeah, we need to add a new entry like this. So we have to close this little boy over here. Okay, I'm coming. So we have to add a new entry. So it has same key. That's why it's echoing an error. So you can't have same key in a dictionary. So that's why it's having that little scroll line over there, right? So just change the key. So we have to get something like this as our dictionary. So we have to, whenever we run our application, we want to append the dictionary inside of the object inside of what? Inside of this big dictionary. And this is where the main problem comes into play. And how can we do that? So what we could basically do, very, very simple. As ABC, we could just go over here, and I know you must have guessed, and we just change this little boy to what? To A for us to append, right? And let's see. So if we run our code, fine and good. And we go to our file.json, and let's see what we'll have. We'll have a total different thing from what we expected. So we expected that this little boy over here gets appended inside of here. But therefore, we have a different thing because we have a separate or a whole entire big dictionary and a small dictionary created again for us, which is actually outside of here because we are having what? We are having append. So you just appended a separate dictionary over here. So how can we make this little boy to get inside of this big dictionary? So I just want you to take a moment from your time and do what? And think, how can we do this? So if you should be able to create or come up with a logic on how to go about this, man, like that's fine. You are a pro. Trust me, you're a pro. Just calm down, calm your nerves, get a pen and a paper, think of how can we write into this big dictionary so that whenever we run our application, we just keep appending instead of this big dictionary and not have like a total separate dictionary all by himself. You understand what I'm saying? So try it out. So pause the video and try it out. So for that reason, for us to do or to carry out this operation, it takes a little bit of work because I need to explain a lot of things for you or a lot of concept that you need to understand, because what we'll actually be doing, deserialization, so that we get this object again and reload it back into the dictionary and now append. Does it make sense? So you need to take a little bit of exercise and a little bit of brain exercise. So for that reason, I prefer to push it to a separate video altogether so you will understand how to reload an object, which is basically this serialization process. Makes sense, right? So while you wait for the next video, try it out yourself and see how it works. So I'm kind of exhausted. Thank you so much, and catch you in the serializing part of this video as we go on. Thank you so much.